When we talk about Black history, we have to get rid of the idea that it has to be all doom and gloom, or even that it has to be mostly doom and gloom. And I think the central line for it, for me, is the idea that the most interesting thing about us is what white people did to us. And I think many people would say, oh, yes, yes. And I would say, oh, no, no, especially not now, not in 2025.
I was impressed by the piece you had in the magazine.
Notice that transition I did? Yeah.
I'm sorry, say it again.
Did you notice the transition I just did to that?
Oh, you've egged me into it. Okay, well, great piece. Congratulations. New York Times Sunday Magazine major feature on the Black Smithsonian on the National Museum of African American History and Culture. Want to talk about that?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I wrote that. And
how did it come about? Were you commissioned to go to the museum and then write about it?
No, actually, I had never been. You know, I was always walking by.
I have yet to go.
Yeah, it's often not the first thing you think of, but I thought it's time. And so I happened to be down there for another reason for 10 seconds. And I thought, during that free afternoon, instead of reading in my hotel room, I'm going to go run down to the mall and see it. And then I just kind of thought, because if you have to crank out something every week, you're always thinking, I thought, I should write about what it's like, because I got the feeling I was going to like it. Like I didn't go in, hate tweeting it or something like that. I thought, I'll bet they did a great job. And so I went in. It's a strenuous museum, even physically. You have to walk up a hill, but there's a point to the hill. You have to walk up the hill because you're joining in the struggle and you come up into the light of the first floor. It's a really good job. And I just thought, this is good. So I wrote a quick piece, like 1,000. And then it was actually Patrick Healy, who until recently was the top editor of the opinion page, of the editorial page. And he is the one who suggested that I flesh it out. And I would not have thought of that myself. But, it's good to be able to write long sometimes. I mean, you have certainly experienced that you have less and less space these days. I call it the tail end of like when the New Republic would let me write 8,000. I understand that doesn't work nowadays, but it was good to be able to stretch out. And so I did it, and I've had good response from it. It seems to have touched people in a way that I was not necessarily going for, but I believed what I wrote.
What did you write? I mean, in a nutshell.
I just wrote that when we talk about Black history, we have to get rid of the idea that it has to be all doom and gloom, or even that it has to be mostly doom and gloom. And I think the central line for it, for me, is when Ralph Ellison said, can a people spend 300 years of living and breathing only in reacting? That's a paraphrase, but only by reacting. Is the idea that the most interesting thing about us is what white people did to us. And I think many people would say, oh, yes, yes. And I would say, oh, no, no, especially not now, not in 2025. And so and then it gets into Nicole Hannah Brown. And Nicole
Hannah Jones, you mean?
Nicole Hannah. Who is that? Nicole Hannah Jones. Yes.
I don't know.
And how she points out that that Black people have made America face up to its ideals. True. But I would have to disagree with her in that. Well, no, I'm not going to say I disagree with her, but that makes it sound like that's the main thing about us, that we're these people standing here. You must face up to your ideals and stop hurting us. And that's the main thing. And America starts in 1619. I get a little impatient with that. I think that we have too much to celebrate, and not just George Washington Carver, not these isolated people, but the whole story. He had a soprano voice. I want to get that out there. George Washington Carver talked like this.
No, I didn't know that.
Isn't that interesting? Anyway, but that's not the Black history that we should be telling, but it should be about.
Why is that interesting? I mean, it is curious, but I wonder if there's some deeper meaning.
Well, wouldn't you expect that he would just have a normal male voice? But instead, he sounded like that. There are speculations as to why it may have been that there was apparently some kind of botched operation when he was a kid. But then there's more about him. He was a much more interesting person than...
People should know George Washington Carver was a scientist who was at Tuskegee Institute in Alabama for many, many years and made great discoveries, especially about various applications of the sweet potato.
Peanut.
I mean, I'm not an expert on George Washington Carver, but he was a scientist of some note in the late 19th.
300 uses of the peanut is what the factoid always was. But he lived long enough.
The peanut, not the sweet potato.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he was recorded. And he, frankly, he sounds like your niece. It's very interesting. But I just thought
your main point is it's not all doom and gloom, and we're not just reactive against the oppression and external imposition. We are also expressive of our own interests and
the things that we have won. You know, for example, the great black business districts, and we always hear about how Tulsa was viciously burned down. Same thing happened in Wilmington, North Carolina. Those are stories that we must tell. But those stories are told as if that happened every time black people built up a business district, that white thugs came in and burned it down once there was some rape allegation or something. Actually, usually that didn't happen. And so there were those districts, and they thrived until desegregation. And black people built these worlds within a world. And it's something that we could do when lynching was ordinary, when segregation was remorseless. We did something right. And we don't hear enough about that sort of thing in Black history. What we hear is that white people hated us and kept us from being the best that we could be. And I remember I was talking to an intelligent, educated black woman about 25 years ago, and she said, "Oh, I think we'll always be a sad people." And I thought, I get it, but no, you're falling too much for the idea that the essence of us is what other people did to us, and that that's all that we can ever be. Where it's supposed to be that we're walking upward, so to speak. And once we get to the light of the lobby, we're not supposed to still be crying. It's supposed to be here we are. And so I was touched by the museum, and it did make me think this is how it should be told, not just the slave manacles. Because when I was little, that was all you got. You got flashcards of all these remote people, usually who lived too long ago to seem relevant to today, like George Washington Carver. Okay, he did that. That's just one person. But then it was roots, slavery. And I found that hard to connect to. And I didn't want to think, okay, I'm going to join them in their sadness, which is what I think this woman I spoke to maybe was thinking. So I think that the museum is a nice way of showing a different kind of Black history than I think a lot of what settled in starting in the 60s and then extended long.